Welcome to our class on Chassidus. We're going to be learning a beautiful Chassidic discourse in the Rebbe. The name of the Chassidic discourse is called Berashit Bara. The Rebbe said this Chassidic discourse on Shabbos, Parshas Bereshis, that year was on the 27th day of Tishri, which was also the Shabbos that blessed the month of Marcheshvan in the year Tafshin Membab, which was exactly 37 years ago. So again, the Chassidic discourse is based on the opening verse in this week's Torah portion, where it says, "Bereshis, in the beginning, bara Elekim, Hashem created, as the Shamayim, the heaven, the הארץ, and the earth." The Rebbe says we know the different questions that are asked in the different Chassidic discourses from the previous Chabad Rebbeim, and especially of the previous Rebbe, on his Chassidic discourse on this verse, Berashit bara Elekim, of the year Taf Shin Gimel, which is basically 80 years ago. And the question they ask is as follows: all the worlds and all the creations of the worlds, which referring to the people in the world, on all the levels of Seder Ishtalshus, like in all the worlds, are included in the two terms that's used in this week's Torah portion, this verse, the Shamayim and Aretz. So everything that was created, all the worlds, all the people, and all the any living thing that exists, all is included in the word Shamayim, heaven, and Aretz, earth. Why is that? Because everything in all the levels of Seder Hishtalshus, and all the levels of flow from world to world, from sphere to sphere, from anything that was created, everything is called Shemayim in reference to the level below it. And everything is also called Eretz, earth, in comparison to the level behind it. So whatever level you're at, there's a higher level, so therefore it's called Shemayim. And therefore it's called Aretz because it's a higher level. And every level has a lower level, therefore it's called Shemayim. Now, for example, the Rebbe says, let's look at the four worlds of Atzilus, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya. So the fact is, if you look at the worlds as a whole, as a unit, Bria, Yetzirah, Asiya, Atzilus, the highest world compared to Bria, Yetzirah, Asiya, it's called Shemayim, it's above it. The same thing also with the world of Bria is called, even though, so Atzilus is Shemayim of Bria, Yetzirah, Asiya. So, but on the other hand, Bria, even though it causes Atzilus to be Shemayim, but Bria is also Shemayim compared to the world of Yetzirah because it's above it, and in reference also to the world of Asiya as well. On the other hand, Bria is called Eretz compared to the world of Atzilus. And the same thing also in reference to the world of Yetzirah. It's Shemayim over Asiya, but it's Aretz compared to the worlds above it. And the same thing with the world of Asiya, obviously is considered Aretz compared to the higher worlds. Now, so that's in general the four worlds. But in the worlds itself, every world is multiple levels. And that's why it says, Es HaShemayim, the heaven, the Es Aretz. And as it should say, Shamayim ba'aretz. What do you mean S? So S is including everything that's in the higher worlds. The S is including everything that's in the lower worlds. In other words, so Shamayim is a general term, which anything that something is above it, it's called below. It's different. The thing above is called Shamayim. Eretz is a general term for anything which is low, which has something above it. Now. So that's in general. But in generally speaking, in reference to all, and I'll use the word in Hebrew, in all Seder Hishtalshus, all the levels that go from one level to the next. So what does it say about everything? It says, Bereshis, in the beginning, bara Elekim, Hashem created. Es HaShemayim v'Haaretz, and it's brought down the Medrash. Medrash Rabbah says as follows. Rashi actually brings in the commentary on the Torah, and it says as follows. Seemingly, it should say Rashis. Rashis is the beginning. So why does it say Bir Rashis? What's the extra bays? So it's again brought down in the Medrash, and Rashi brings it. The reason why it says Bir, the extra bays before Rashis, it's referring to the Torah, which is called the beginning, and in reference to the Jewish people are called beginning. So bays is referring to two things that are before the beginning, which is Torah and the Jewish people. In other words, the creation of the heaven and the earth, all levels, and everything that's in the levels of the heaven and the earth, all Seder Ishtalshus, all different levels, any flow of energy. What's the reason? For the bays. Everything was created for the bays. What's the bays? Again, everything was created so that we should learn Torah and we should do the mitzvahs through the Jewish people. So that's the reason why it says Bereshis. Bereshis is, that means everything was created, all levels, for the two things, learning Torah, and for us, human beings, the Jewish people, to learn Torah and doing mitzvahs. Now, so what do we see? Why did Hashem create the world? Hashem created the world. All the worlds Hashem created it was for the Jewish people and to learn Torah. So therefore, just like we explained before that Shemayim, you have Shemayim on multiple levels, and as you have higher on multiple levels till you reach to the bottom, you have Aretz on multiple levels, obviously till you reach to the top. So therefore, you must say the idea of Shemayim, where there's multiple levels, and Aretz, there's multiple levels on the lower side, applies as well to Torah and the Jewish people. And on the contrary, the division of Shemayim, multiple levels of higher and multiple levels of lower, is primarily by the Jewish people, primarily in the Torah, and because there's multiple levels by the Jewish people and multiple levels in the Torah, that's why, and everybody uses a Yiddish word, Spiegel Zachab, that's why it applies also in the world. So originally in Torah there's multiple levels, as we'll soon see. In the Jewish people there's multiple levels, as we'll soon see. And that's why in the world there's multiple levels of Shemayim and multiple levels of Aretz. In other words, the Rebbe explains like this. The Rebbe brings from Torah in Parshas Bereshis, from the Alter Rebbe, and it's explained in many places as well, that there is specifically, there's the level of Shemayim, and which is the higher level, and there's level of Aretz, both in the area of Torah and both by the Jewish people. And the Rebbe explains, based on what it says in Torah, what is the idea of Shemayim, a higher level than a lower level in Torah? So very simple. We all know there's the written law, Torah Shabbat, and Torah Shabbat Peh, and the oral law. So obviously Torah Shabbat, so to speak, is the higher level, and Torah Shabbat Peh is the lower level. And not only that, in that itself, so we learned before, it says Es HaShemayim, the Es HaAretz. It means it's not just a higher level and a lower level, but there's multiple higher levels and multiple levels. So it applies to Torah as well. So how does it apply to Torah as well? Because we know Torah is huge. You can learn your whole life Torah, you'll never get to the end of it. Torah is technically infinite. And the infinite part of Torah applies both in the written part of the Torah. Look how many commentaries there are on the Torah, the 5 books of Moses and the prophets. And the same thing also in Torah Shabbat Peh, the Mishnah and the Talmud. Look how many commentaries you can go forever, learning deeper and deeper and deeper. There's literally, and I'll say it in Hebrew, there's literally bli gvul. There's infinite levels of Torah, both on the highest level and both on the lowest level. So that's we find the idea in reference to Torah. And the same thing applies to the Jewish people, that there's the Shemayim, there's the higher level in the Jewish people, and there's the Aretz. And like Dara brings in the Zohar says that the Jewish people are divided up into 10 levels. And as the Torah says, Mirashechem, from the leaders of the Jewish people, up until you have the wood choppers, the water carriers, and the Zohar lists 10 different categories. In other words, so therefore, since there's 10 categories, so when it says Rosh Sheichem, the heads of the Jewish people, that's referring to the Shemayim, the heaven of the Jewish people. And literally, Rosh, they're their head. And the same thing also, the Shiftechem, the heads of your tribes. Why? Because a Shevet comes from the word, from like a branch of a tree, which is connected to the tree. So again, you have a higher level. Then you have the wood choppers and the water carriers, which are the lower level of the Jewish people. So you have in general, like the Zohar says, there's 10 levels. So the higher levels are called Shemayim, the lowest one is called Aretz, or the lower compared to the higher is called Aretz. And so that's in generally by the Jewish people. There is not only in general by the Jewish people, there's different categories of people, Shemayim and Aretz, but in each individual, in every one of us, we have both components. The Shemayim part of us, the higher level, and there's the Aretz, the lower part of us. Because the fact is, we know that every single person is called an Olam Maleh. Every one of us, every single Jewish person, every person is a complete world. So in our world, we have the higher part of our world and the lower part of our worlds. And not only that, like it says in the prophet, it says as follows. It says in the prophet that the world Hashem gave, ha'olam nasam b'liboy shel adam. God gave the world in the heart of the person. What does that mean? That the whole world is dependent on our heart, which means on the way we serve Hashem. In other words, literally all the worlds, Atzilus, Bria, Tzira, Asiya, all the different parts of the world, literally up to this physical world that we're in. And like it says in the prophets clearly, Hashem says, Anoichi Asisi, Anoichi Asisi Aretz, Hashem created the earth, right? But then he says, the Adam Aleh Barasi. I went ahead and I created a human being and put him in the world. So it says the Adam, mankind, Aleh on the world, Barasi. He used the term Barasi, I created. So Barasi is made up of 5 letters. Beis, Reish, Aleph, Saf, Yud. So numerically, it equals 613, which as we know, the 613 commandments. So the Barasi, Hashem created human beings, the Jewish people in this world, so that Barasi, we should observe the 613 commandments. So the goal is that we should observe the 613 commandments. So therefore, since all levels of Ishtalshos are divided into 2 levels, higher and lower, so the same thing also in the worlds is that way, but in the human being it's that way. Globally, all the people, but specifically in every single one of us, we have a higher and lower. And that's why every one of the Jewish people has 10 koichos. We all have 10 powers, starting from Chachma, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gvur, Tiferes, Netzach, Yesod, Yisod, Malchus, which is connected to the 10 levels of the Jewish people. As we said before, Rashechem, Shiftechem, the heads of the tribes, the wood choppers, the water carriers. In other words, every single one of us have the level of Rashechem, which are the highest spheres, Shamayim, Aretz. So that's what the Rebbe is saying over here. This before we go forward, the Rebbe is saying is like this: in Beraishis Bara Elkim, Shemaim Aretz. So in everything there's higher and lower. And in as you go from one level to the next, in the worlds, in people, etc., but then in each and every one else, there's higher and lower levels. Now, as the Rebbe said, it says Bereishis, Beis referring to the 2 Reishis. The world was created for the Torah and the Jewish people. So in Torah you have different levels, and in the Jewish people, we were creating this world so that we can go ahead and learn Torah, do the mitzvahs. And by doing that, obviously we make the world a godly place. Now, the Rebbe goes on to say as follows. It's explained in many, many places that why did Hashem create the world? What was the reason Hashem created the world? So so it's brought down in many, many places in Kabbalah and Chassidus that the ultimate reason why Hashem created the world and all the different levels of all the world, etc., so there's Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, Asiya, and everything, and all the details of it, etc. But the reason why Hashem created everything, the ultimate purpose was for Olam Hazeh HaTachta, in this physical world, this low world, that there's no place that's lower than this, which means where God is so concealed. And the goal is, the reason why Hashem created this world is, all the worlds, to create the world where God doesn't exist, God's not revealed, and our job is to make a dwelling place for Hashem where Hashem is not revealed. In other words, in terminology we're using in this Chassidic discourse, the ultimate intent of Hashem creating the world wasn't for Shemayim, wasn't for godly things, wasn't for heavenly things, but the reason why Hashem created the world was for Aretz. The lower you get, the darker you get, where God's more concealed. That's why Hashem created the world. So everything is important. Everything Hashem created. But what's the reason why Hashem created the world? Hashem created the world for the darkness. Now, so based on that, the Rebbe says, so you have to say, it also applies, just like Hashem created the world, all the different levels, the ultimate goal was for the lowest level, God's concealed. So that applies also to Torah and to the Jewish people. In other words, the main purpose of Torah is Learning Torah where? In this physical world. Learning Torah in Galus. Learning Torah in exile. Learning Torah when it's not popular to learn Torah, or when you're tired. Specifically, that's called tachtain, bringing down Torah down to this world. And that's why it says in the Medrash that if the rabbinical court on high in heaven has a question, they don't rule up in heaven, they come down to this world to ask, what does this world, the Bezdin in this world say? Why? Because where's the main learning Torah? Just like in the world, the main world is down here. That was the intent. The same thing also, the main Torah is the Torah that's learned in the darkest places. And not only that, even take it a step further, and in the Torah, the way it's this world, the ultimate of Torah is not just learning the Torah, but Torah that brings to action, because action is the lowest level. Because as we know, it says clearly in Talmud, Gadol Limud, what's the greatness of learning Torah? That brings us to do action. The ultimate great power of learning Torah is when we follow through and we do the mitzvahs. Shabbos, kashrus, tefillin, family purity, all the laws. The goal of learning is to do the action. So that's in terms of Torah. The goal is the lowest level. The same thing also when it comes to the human being. That the ultimate goal, our goal is that we physically should do the mitzvah. And it's all about, and the expression is in Hebrew, hamaisa hu ikar, the main thing is what? The main thing is the action. So again, what are we saying is, just like when Hashem created the heaven and the earth, the ultimate goal was for the lowest level. The same thing also, Torah, the ultimate goal is the way Torah is learned down here, and the way we observe the mitzvahs down in this physical world. So the Rebbe says he'd like to connect this, what is brought down in the Zohar. The Zohar says as follows. In reference to the verse, Berashis bara Elekim es השמים הארץ, so the Zohar says, this verse, in this verse, you have in there concealed a hinting to all the 10 series. All the 10 series, starting from Chachma down to Malchus, are all in this this verse of Berashis bara Elekim es השמים הארץ. And it's also including Bereshis, the beginning. And as we know, what is the Bereshis? What's the first Sphira? The first Sphira is Chachma. What's higher than Chachma? Keser. Up until the last Sphira, Haaretz, the last Sphira, which is Malchus. In other words, the Zohar says this verse is including Bereshis, the first Sphira, which is Chachma or Keser, and Aretz, which is the last Sphira, which is what? Which is Malchus. Now, so that's what the Zohar says, that the verse includes all the spheres. And never goes on to say the same thing also with the first word itself. What's the first word? The first word is Bereshis. So what does Bereshis mean again? So the Zohar says, Beis, it's made up of two words, Beis, the letter Beis, and Reshis, the beginning. And Rebbe brings from a classic work of the Mittler Rebbe, the second Chabad Rebbe, in a book called Toras Chaim, and he says like this, and also in the Chassidic Discourse of the Tzemach, the third Chabad Rebbe, that it says Bereshis, again the base, before we already learned it means the Torah and the Jewish people. But what it's explained in Chassidus, both in the Mittler Rebbe Chassidus and the Tzemach Chassidus, that the base is referring to Chachma Ilah, a high level of Chachma, and Chachma Tata, a low level of Chachma, which basically is the high level of the spheres and the low level of the spheres. So again, so you see in this verse, you have all the spheres, but then you also have in the first word Chachma, but two levels, the highest and the lowest. And from the spheres, all the 10 spheres that are in this world, or the highest and the lowest, Chachma, Keser to Malchus, or the high level Chachma and the lower level Chachma, from there the spheres get drawn down into the world, and not only in the worlds. As we know, there are 4 worlds which are connected to the 10 spheres. In other words, so it goes from the 10 spheres into the world. How many worlds? There are 4 worlds. Atzilus, Bri, Yetzirah, Asiyah. So the Rebbe says, why is there 4 worlds? Because the 4 worlds come from the 10 spheres. The reason why it's 4 because it's coming from the 10 spheres. What's the connection that the 4 worlds are coming from the 10 spheres? The Rebbe explains like this. We know, and Chassidus is explained many, many places, that the powerful name of Hashem, Yud, Hey, and above Hey, from the powerful name of Hashem, the 4 worlds are created. So the powerful name of Hashem, which has 4 letters, created the four worlds. But so knows the four-letter name of Hashem, Yud Hey Vav Hey, created the four worlds. But these four worlds are connected, like the Rebbe says, to the 10 spheres. So it's also connected to the Yud. What's the connection between the four worlds that come from the four-letter name of Hashem that's connected to the 10 spheres? So the Rebbe explains beautifully, and he says like this. Because if you take every one of the letters in Hashem's name, the Yud, the Hey, the Vav, and the Hey, so there's something which is called in Kabbalah a Milui. What's a Milui? So the letter Yud is one letter. But if you spell out Yud, if I tell you spell it out to me, what does Yud spell it out? So it's spelled Yud, Vav, Daled. Yud, that's Yud, Vav, Daled. Hey is Hey, Hey. Vav is Vav, Ala, Vav. And Hey again is Hey, Hey. So if you have Yud, 3 letters, Hey, you have 2 letters, Vav, you have 3 letters, and Hey, you have 2 letters. See how many letters you have? You have a total of 10 letters. So the Rebbe is bringing out beautifully, what did we say? The 4 worlds come from the 10 spheres. So, and the 4 worlds we know come from the 4 letters of Hashem's name. But the truth is, in revealed way, it's 4 letters. But in the Miloi, the 4 letters that make Hashem's name is actually 10 letters. So the same thing also applies to the worlds that are created from the Yud Kei Vav Kei. In other words, so 1 second. The fact is, we know that the worlds are created from Shem Elokim, as it says in the beginning of the Torah, by Yomer Elokim. But the truth is, the source of create in the revealed state, it came from Shem Elokim. But the ultimate power comes from Yud Kei Vav Kei. So the 4 worlds that were created are 4 worlds, but it's also connected to 10. To the number 10. Why? Because all the 4 worlds come from the 10 spheres of the world of Atzilus. And even before that, to the 10 mamoros, the 10 utterances that Hashem used to create the world, on a simple level, according to, in the way it's written in the Torah. And the fact is, the verses say, by Yomer, there was 10 times Hashem said by Yomer. So the 4 worlds come from, again, the 10 spheres of Atzilus, and it also comes from the 10 utterances that Hashem used to create the world. Now, since ultimately, so we see in the world is the 4 connected to the 10. The 4 worlds coming from the 4-letter name of Hashem's name, which comes from the Milui, and then also the worlds come from the physical creation world, from the 10 utterances. Now, but since we said that the world was created for the Beis, for the Torah and the Jewish people, so obviously there must be the 4 in Torah and in the Jewish people, and obviously they're connected to the idea of 10. Where do we see that? So we see that the Rebbe says, there's an expression, Ein mikra yotzei b'nei pshutoi, the literal meaning of the verse. In other words, you have a part of Torah, which is called pshutei shel mikra. Pshat, what is the Torah saying? That's one level. Then you have drush, different homiletics that you learn out. Higher level you have remez, and a higher level you have ksod. So there's 4 different levels to understand, connect to the Torah. Pshat, the lowest level, remez, drush, and sod, which is actually called, if you want to, put the first letter of each one, it's called Pardes, the orchard of Torah. And the Torah is connected to the 4 worlds of Atzilus, Bri, Yetzia, Asiyah. Now, so you see 4 levels of Torah in Torah. The same thing also, when it comes to the Jewish people, there are 4 levels. Like the Alter explains clearly in the laws of learning Torah, that every single person has to learn 4 areas of Torah. It's not just to learn Pshat, Remez, etc. We have to learn all 4. Not only that, the Rebbe says, it's brought down in the writings of the Arizal, that in every one of the parts of the Torah, Pshat, Remez, Drus, and Sod, there's 600,000 commentaries, 600,000 insights. 600,000 insights in Pshat, in Remez, in Drus, and in Sod. What's the idea of 600,000? Which corresponding to the amount of the souls of the Jewish people. Because this number, 600,000, is like an everlasting number which never changes. That's the main source of the amount of people on the soul level. And that's why one of the names of the Jewish people is called Yisrael. What does Yisrael mean? It's an abbreviation. Yesh, Yisrael spelled with 5 letters. Yud, Sin, Reish, Aleph, Lamed, which means Yesh, Shishim, Riboy, Oisios, Torah. The 600,000 letters in the Torah. In other words, from the 600,000 letters, That's how we get our energy. That's how we get our life force. So in other words, so you see that in Torah, there's in the four levels of Pardes, Pshat, Remez, Shoid, and then which is connected to the four levels of the Jewish people. And this is, the Rebbe says, so we have four, right? The four levels. But what's the connection with the 10? And the Rebbe explains very simply. Because what did we just learn? The 600,000. 600,000 basically is 6 to the square of the 6 midos. The small phase. Their ampim is Chesed Gvur Tiferes Netzachot Yesod, so it's 6 to the square, and it's times 10 multiple times till you get to 600,000. So you see that there's 4 different parts to the Torah, but it's connected to what? The 6 square connected to the idea of number of 10. Now, so the Rebbe goes on to say as follows. So this is basically the spiritual work that we have in this world, that we have the Jewish people and Torah. I know that the world was created for us so that we should make an impact in the world. Hashem put us in the world, gave us the Torah. So we have 3 components. We have the world, we have us, and we have the Torah. Our job is to learn Torah, and that's how we transform the world. So you're going to say, 1 second, what do we have to transform the world? The world was created by Hashem. It's complete. And like the Torah says clearly in the beginning of Bereshit, Eile toildos hashamayim ba'aretz. This is the offspring of the heaven and the earth. And if you give a look in the word toildos, it's spelled with 2 vavs. It means it's complete. Hashem created the complete world. But nevertheless, what does it say afterwards? Asher bara Elokim, God created la'asos. Even though, Hashem created a complete world, but He gave us a job, la'asos, to do. What does la'asos do? L'takin, to fix. Not only that, the Rebbe says, take a step further. What does it say? Asher bara Elokim la'asos. When was that said? After it says, "Vayichulu hashamayim ba'aretz," Hashem says, "I finished. My job is done. I finished creating a heaven and the world." But what does Hashem say afterwards? Asher bara Elokim la'asos. In other words, even after, Hashem said, "I created a complete world." Vayichulu, I completed a complete world. But nevertheless, la'asos, we still have to transform the world and elevate the world. When we learn Torah in this world, and la'asos, we're fixing the world, we'll ultimately reach the great revelation what's going to be in the future, which it says in reference to the future, Eila Toldos Peretz. This is the offspring of Peretz, and over there, Toldos also is written with 2 vavs, which means it's complete, which is higher than the Toldos when Hashem created the world. Because then what's going to happen is, I'll say it in Hebrew, V'nigla kvoid Hashem. The glory of Hashem is going to be revealed. V'ro kol basar, literally the flesh will see. All unity keep Hi Hashem. We're all going to see that Hashem is speaking. Now, how does that happen? How is it going to happen that we're ultimately going to have the great revelation of Mashiach is going to come? It happens by us doing our work, by learning Torah, by observing Torah, by doing the mitzvahs, and specifically by doing tshuva. By repenting, by returning to Hashem. And we know that when Mashiach comes, it says clearly in the Zohar, La Sava Tzadikaya B'Tiyufta, that Mashiach can inspire even tzaddikim to do tshuva. So it's not enough to learn Torah and to do mitzvahs. It's amazing, it's important. But we also need to do tshuva. And like the Alter Rebbe writes clearly in Tanya, that by us doing our work during exile, through the challenges, and especially the doing our work of learning Torah and doing mitzvahs in ikras the Mashiach, which means in the heels of Mashiach, when it's very, very dark, when the darkness covers up the earth, and it's literally full of dark clouds and smoke. But what happens is, even amongst the darkness, we do not get intimidated by the darkness, and we actually add in the light of doing mitzvahs and learning Torah, and especially learning Chassidus, which we know learning Chassidus is the light of the Torah, and let's explain in the Chassidic discourses. This will bring to the coming of Mashiach, when the wellsprings of mysticism is going to be spread all over the world, and that's when Mashiach is going to come, and we're going to do our work even and specifically in the darkness of exile, and we're going to go together with the elders and with our young, with our sons and our daughters, everyone together. The whole complete nation is going to go together with the complete world, as we know that when Mashiach comes, The land of Israel is going to spread all over the world, and for the one hand, the land of Israel is going to spread all over the world, but also Yerushalayim is going to spread all over Israel. So Israel is going to be all over the world, Jerusalem is going to be all over Israel, and so over there specifically, when it comes to the holy mountain, the Har HaBayis, and over there when it comes to the Bet HaMikdash, the place that Hashem chose, and over there when it comes to the Holy of Holies. And the Rebbe finishes off, says it's going to happen B'mheira b'yameinu mamash, quickly in our days, literally in our times, and we're going to have the Geula, the redemption, the true redemption, and the complete redemption. So here you have another powerful, beautiful Chassidic discourse of the Rebbe about the power that we have to learn Torah and do mitzvahs, and specifically during Galus, which will ultimately bring the great revelation of Mashiach. And let's hope and pray that our next class will be in Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh. Have a great and blessed week. Shavua Tov.